I've got 3 questions that came in the same email. Since they're related, I'll go ahead and address them all at once. The first question: will you ever celebrate a pontifical high mass? I hope so. In fact, I'd like to be able to celebrate a papal mass with all the deacons and subdeacons and assistant priests and bishops and cardinals. And after the universal conversion, that will be restored to the world. Possibly during my reign. Lord only knows how long he's going to keep me around. But yes, I would certainly like to celebrate a pontifical or even a papal high mass with all the bells and whistles. Because this is for the greater honor and glory of God. Not for me, but for God. That's why I would want to celebrate such a mass. Then the question come up, who consecrated you bishop? And that's a good question. A priest contacted me, well, actually a deacon contacted me, 7, 8 years ago, maybe longer ago than that. He was down in Texas, a married man, deacon in one of the groups that's what they call the independent movement. Okay, you have 3 basic groups today. You have the Novus Ordo Conciliar Church, which is not Catholic anymore. Okay, so we ignore them, but I mean, they claim the name Catholic. Then you have the Traditionalists. That would be basically Archbishops Lefebvre and Tooke, and the priests and bishops emanating from them. Okay, that's the Traditionalists. Then you have the independent movement, is what it's called today. You probably would have known it more. It was called the Old Catholics 100 to 200 years ago and on further back. The Orthodox actually is also an additional group that is kind of merging into the independent movement because they tend to work together. And so you have the Old Catholic lines like Arnold Harris Matthew, Carfora coming on down. And then you have the Duarte Costa lines coming up from Brazil. Okay, all very valid. I mean, the Traditionalists and the independent movement are basically both valid. Neither are legitimate. But that's where we're at today. That's a whole other story. So, this deacon in the independent movement, specifically Duarte Costa lines, although I believe, if I recall, the old Catholic lines emerged in because when you consecrate a bishop, you have more than one bishop. Some consecrations I've seen listed have like 5 bishops, and some bishops do what they call line collecting. In other words, they'll get consecrated by a group over bishops here, then they go over here and find someone, I don't have these lines, so they get conditionally reconsecrated. So, I mean, after 2 or 3, 4 consecrations like that, surely one of the bishops in there had to be valid. And when I did some research, book Bishops at Large from the early 60s, an interesting read. Up to that point, the majority in the independent movement strove for validity. They wanted validity. They made extra efforts to have validity, a validity that was acceptable to the Catholic Church, the church founded by our Lord Jesus Christ, which I'm head of now. Okay? That was great until 68. Because with the introduction of the new rite in the Novus Ordo, which that's the one they would consider the Catholic Church, now some of these groups have also adopted the new rites of the sacraments and so are invalid. Some, not a whole lot. But many still strive for validity. So he's a valid deacon. And then about 3 years ago, he made contact again, and we started conversing more, and then he told me he'd been ordained a priest. And so he started putting me in contact with various independent movement bishops who he knew were valid. I mean, he knew we couldn't get me ordained. Finally, he found a bishop who would consecrate him bishop. He was consecrated bishop by him, and in turn came and ordained and consecrated me. His name is Bishop Robert Bjarnason. Okay? Very valid. We checked out the lines. Now, some people look down on the independent movement because there's some real characters in there. Read Bishops at Large. Man, some of these boys are characters. But stop and think. Take a look at the Took lines. Okay? There's some real characters there. You start out with Clemente. That's, don't know how many bishops stem from Clemente. Someone who was in seminary, he entered our mate at the same time I entered Econe. He was ordained a priest by a Clemente bishop and consecrated bishop by Bishop Slupski, who was consecrated by Bishop McKenna, who was consecrated by Bishop Delorier, who was consecrated by Took, right straight from the Took lines. Okay? And Took himself was kind of a character, and there people have some questions about it. The fact that a person is a character, or even an evil person, does not destroy validity. Okay? I can baptize. A convicted murderer can baptize. A pedophile can baptize. Even a non-Catholic can baptize. It does not affect validity. That's what we're looking for, is validity. Legitimacy, none of them have got it. Okay? And then the next question, and why was it done years after you became Pope? All right. I was elected July 16, 1990. I was not ordained and consecrated until December 9 and 10 of 2011. We're talking 21 plus years. There is a problem with being Pope. None of your bishops want to have anything to do with the Pope. Okay? If they're SSPX, they're in that unit. If they're independent, like the traditionalists, because they're basically independent movements, with the exception of Bishops Dolan and Sanborn, most of the bishops are one-man shows. Bishop Pivarunas of the CMRI, he runs the CMRI. Okay, that's how it works. And during the Sede Vacante, the way they're running it, they've got no superior. Okay? All of the Took bishops were contacted between 1987 and 1990, an election. All of them were certainly contacted in 1990 because I personally did it. I contacted each and every one of them about the papal election. No response. And that's kind of interesting because Archbishop Took consecrated bishops for the sole purpose of electing a pope. Because of his advanced age, he wasn't sure how long it would take. So he consecrated Carmona Zamora, especially. Possibly Delorier was consecrated for that very reason. I'm pretty sure Einzig, Drs. Hiller and Heller arranged both consecrations, wanted that. Well, after Delorier was consecrated, he comes up with this crazy material formal thing. In any case, I was at the meeting in May of 1982. They discussed the vacancy. They discussed the election of a pope. Bishop George Musey, Bishop Adolfo Zamora, Bishop Moises Carmona were there. Father Louis Vasalis, who eventually became Bishop Louis Vasalis, was there. Father Robert McKenna, who was later consecrated by Delorier, was there. In I think it's January of 83. May of 82 was this meeting I was at. January of 83, they held another meeting in New Orleans. The May 82 was in Dallas, to discuss the election of the Pope. Archbishop Took himself was there. If you take a look at his declaration, you'd have to find, I think I'm the only one who puts up the list of supporting documents. Okay? Everyone has the declaration that puts it up. Like the CMRI website has the declaration. They don't have the list of supporting documents, which is extremely important. One of them is unum sanctum. It's absolutely necessary for salvation to be subject to the Roman Pontiff. Took wanted a pope. Carmona and Zamora, I believe, wanted a pope. Musey and Vasalis, I'm not sure. But in any case, that was our sole reason for existing. But None of them replied. The closest I got is I was in contact with a priest who was ordained by Bishop Carmona, and he almost came to the election. He later became a bishop. Bishop Lopez Gaston, I believe it is. It's either Gaston Lopez or Lopez Gaston. I keep getting that mixed up. In any case, it was years before I ever actually made any contact with a priest successfully. Okay? I couldn't get close to them. I might make unilateral. I write them and never hear back. I'm talking about actually interact with a priest or a bishop. It was years. Not for want of trying on my end. Okay? If I had any chance at a priest or a bishop, I made contact. Because it's about saving souls, but I also need to get ordained and consecrated. Now, a priest couldn't have helped on that end unless he could put me in contact with a bishop. But in my opinion, most priests and bishops don't want to be under authority. Okay? Now, your priests, do they obey the bishop that ordained them? Some do, some don't. Okay? But none of your bishops want to be under authority. They run their own show. That's the way it works. That's why it took so long. It took a humble deacon. He accepted the priesthood because he was in prison ministry, and where he was ministering, they said, "We need you as a priest." So he went and got ordained. I mean, it's pretty easy to get ordained if you're not the Pope. And then when we both end up in contact with this same bishop at the same time. I think I could have talked to him in ordaining me directly, possibly. But it just worked out. Bishop Bjarnason went straight in, got the job done, got me ordained, consecrated. And we have it done. And this points out a big problem. Your priests and bishops don't truly want to be obedient. And it's absolutely necessary for them to be obedient. Priests to their bishop, the bishop of the diocese they are in, the territory. You pull up Google Maps, and you define a territory, all right? For instance, I'm currently sitting in the Archdiocese of Kansas City in Kansas. That's the diocese. Of course, the seat is vacant because the Conciliar Church has all the property. But that's where I'm physically in. A priest who functions here must be subject to that archbishop, not to another archbishop over here or one across the sea or another bishop somewhere else. All right. Bishops must be subject to the Pope. This is the order established. The order established by Jesus Christ was Pope and bishops. Okay. The Church added on the level of pastor, priest subject to the bishop. Okay? It's very simple. We're trying to restore that order, and the devil is fighting it. That's another reason why I think it took so long. Okay? The devil is not fighting the SSPX. He has the SSPX. The devil is not fighting the traditionalists. He has the traditionalists. Okay? Because they are in a state of error. Many of the priests and bishops are good men. The faithful that are going to them believe they're doing the right thing. Okay? But it is still objectively an error. Read my book, 54 Years to Change the Catholic Church. I go into the basic details why this is wrong. The independent movement, there are some flaky ones in it, but then there are some really good guys. Bjarnason's not the only one. I have been in contact with other priests and bishops more recently. Nice people. I think they're honestly trying to do what they think is right. Objectively, they are not. The devil has them as well. Okay? The devil doesn't care which error he gets you into. Just as long as he gets you into error and then has a shot at destroying your soul. And I'm not saying all traditionalists are going to hell. No, I'm not saying that. But they are in a state of error, and our mind is created for solely truth. Okay? So the devil's not fighting the independent movement. He's not fighting the traditionalists. He is fighting the papacy. That's why it took so long. I hope this answers your questions.